Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Before we continue on, I will go ahead and remind you that I am not a lawyer. I'm not legally allowed to practice law in Vietnam. I'm just simply a foreigner from the United States who has learned the labor code of Vietnam so I can try and help other English teachers to go ahead and avoid pitfalls and problems that they may experience. So, we will go ahead and move on. Last clip, I went ahead and told you that I wanted to go ahead and speak about the earlier labor codes that are available. Last time we talked about Article 168, talking about insurance. So we're going to go back to the very beginning of the labor code, all the way to Article, I think, 6, maybe 5. So, all right. Actually, yeah, we're going to go through 5 first because 5 is, first and everything. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So, Article 5, rights and obligations of employees. This one is important because of the fact that it teaches you what you are and are not supposed to do. And it's right there in English and Vietnamese. I'm going to read this out to you and explain it piece by piece. So, Article 5, rights and obligations of employees. Clause 1, an employee has the right to A. Work, freely choose a job, workplace, or occupation, participate in basic and advanced occupational training, develop professional skills, suffer no discrimination, forced labor, and sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, why is that important? Do you remember previously when we talked about Article 8, Clause 1, and Article 3, Clause 8 of the Labor Code that said that you're not supposed to suffer discrimination in the workforce? Yeah, this actually goes ahead and cements it right here. Article 8, Clause 1, Article 3, Clause 8, and Article 5, Clause 1, Subclause A. Suffer no discrimination right there. So this means if you are suffering discrimination and you're working for an English center or any employer here in Vietnam, you can sue. Forced labor and sexual harassment in the workplace, that's pretty self-explanatory. But forced labor in this case, in my opinion, means more like human trafficking and stuff like that. Not, well, we'll just go ahead and move on. So, subclause B. Receive a salary commensurate with his or her occupational skills on the basis of an agreement with the employer. Be provided with personal protective equipment and work in an occupationally safe and healthy environment. Take statutory sick leaves, annual paid leaves, and receive collective welfare benefits. What this means is quite simple. You are required to receive a salary based off of what you are doing. So if you're an English teacher, your employer is required to pay you right there on the basis of an agreement. That means that you have an employment contract that's on the basis of an agreement, which means they are required to pay you. Right here, be provided with personal protective equipment. Now, this right here, an occupationally safe and healthy environment. See, this right here is a bit of a minefield because a lot of employees, especially the new type Gen Z millennials, whatever you want to call it, from the United States that think that they don't need to wear masks and get vaccinated and stuff like that. Well, facts don't care about your feelings. And I know that a lot of liberals have heard this a lot, but facts do not care about your feelings. Unlike the United States, where masks and vaccines are optional, here in Vietnam it isn't. If you refuse to wear a mask, you will be barred from doing certain activities. If you refuse to get vaccinated, same thing, you will be barred from doing certain activities. Just like when the COVID virus spread throughout Vietnam over the last 2 or 3 years. What happened was the fact that so let me go ahead and reverse that. COVID-19 that's because it was discovered in 2019. It started in 2020. It's technically been 3 years. So we're just going to move on. You're required to wear a mask. You're required to get vaccines. If you don't want to do either one, you need to look for employment elsewhere because they will limit you, just like they did last time. If a major virus spikes, just like what happened with COVID-19, they will go ahead and make you wear a mask or else you can't go outside. They will make you get a vaccine or else you can't go shopping. They will make you comply or else you leave. It's that simple. If your vanity is more important than your students' health and safety, if you want to not wear a mask when you're teaching English, even though the school and the government requires it, that tells people that your vanity, your looks are more important than your students' health and safety, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Yep, I said that. If you refuse to wear a mask because you think your looks are more important than your students' health and safety, you should be ashamed of yourself. Back when I taught English, I always wore masks. I kept 1 to 2 meter distance from my students and I always used hand sanitizer. I did my absolute best to try not to get sick. And yet, because my English center didn't care, I still got sick because they still let TAs go to school that were sick, even though those TAs were supposed to stay home. Yeah, that's how I got sick last year. It was because I worked with a sick TA that didn't want to stay home. Now, here's the other thing. Take statutory sick leave. Yeah. If you are sick, you need to stay home and take statutory sick leaves. That's what it means. Now, here's another thing. Annual paid leave. Annual paid leave. PTO, paid time off. That's what this means. This is guaranteed under Article 113. 113. And I know that right off the top of my head. So, because we're doing this in order, it's going to go ahead and take a while. After we go ahead and talk about this, I think we'll talk about paid time off and stuff and the other stuff before we get back with the employers. Yes, with me, it's not simple. We do not simply walk from A to B, if you've seen the memes on that. No, we go from A to X to number 3 to the letter Q, back to the letter I, number 3, and then letter B. So that's how my brain works. I know it makes things a lot more interesting than it needs to be. But yes, you are required to receive annual paid leave. Your employer is not allowed to deny you this. Annual paid leave means that you get 1 day per month that you work for your employer. So for 1 year, your employer is required to give you 12 days off, 14 if you work a hazardous job. And no, teaching English is not a hazardous job. They're talking about things like, I don't know, working steel, working with uranium, underwater welding, truly dangerous jobs. And receive collective welfare benefits. This means that you are also required to receive these benefits from the government if you have paid into the system, such as with the social insurance, unemployment insurance, health insurance, stuff like that. If you've paid into the system, you're legal, you've paid into the system, you are required to receive those benefits that you paid into. Now, subclause C, establish or join. Okay, let's go ahead and slide it up here so the Vietnamese portion's equal. All right, now letter C, establish, join a representative. It's mistyped. This was typed and translated from Vietnamese into English. That's the reason why there's a lot of spelling mistakes and errors and stuff in it. So we'll continue. C, establish, join a representative organization of employees, occupational associations, and other organizations in accordance with the law, request and participate in dialogues with the employer, implementation of democracy regulations and collective bargaining with the employer, receive consultancy at the workplace to protect his or her legitimate rights and interests, participate in the management activities in accordance to the employer's regulations. Now, one of the things that I forgot to mention previously about, I think it was letter B, personal protective equipment and work in an occupationally safe and healthy environment. There are separate laws that deal with this. It's called the occupational safety laws, right there, occupational safety and health laws. And it's a separate law book, and I do have that. But that only gets used if I'm actually at a job site. Like if I have my own job, if I have my own business, that's when that book comes out. So anyways, yeah, there is a separate law for that. And yeah, from what I understand, it's still valid. So getting back to letter C, what this means is simple. You are allowed to join a union if you so choose. But for foreigners specifically, we cannot join a union. From what I was told, foreigners cannot join a labor union here in Vietnam because it has something to do with the government. That's all I know. Now, from what I also understand is that, let's just say magically, I go ahead and get enough teachers who want to sign up for a union. And how would I go about getting it approved? Well, I don't know all the details, to be quite honest. But what I do know is this, is that if you can go ahead and get the approval of 5 ministries, you need the Ministry of Education and Training, Ministry of Labor, War Invalids and Social Affairs, Ministry of Public Security. Let's see, what else was it? Okay, so you got Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Public Security, and then there's 2 more, and I forgot what they were, but I know that you got to have at least 5, and then you go ahead and pay like 1 billion dong, and then if they actually approve it, you have to have an additional 10 billion dong in order to go ahead and start a union that is legal. But beyond that, you are allowed to receive consultancy at the workplace to protect his or her legitimate rights and interests. This means that you are allowed to look at these videos that I am showing to you because of the fact that you are receiving consultancy at your workplace to protect your legitimate rights and interests. You are consulting me to see what your options are as far as protecting your legitimate rights and interests with your employer. Participate in management activities according to the employer's regulations. Now, this right here is quite easy. This means that essentially, if your boss wants you to do something, like say if they want you to attend a cookout or something like that, yeah, technically you do need to go. But at the same time, if it's voluntary, that means you don't need to go. If they are not paying you, that means it's voluntary. You don't need to go. However, if you don't go, it might cause problems for you later on. So that's all I can say. So moving on. Double D, which is right here. Okay, moving up. Right here, letter D. Unilaterally terminate the employment contract. This is a very, very spicy part of the employment contract itself. Oh, all right. No. I misquoted that part. My mistake. This is letter D, not DD. Letter D is right here. So you are allowed to refuse to work if he or she finds that the work directly threatens his or her life or health. So, yeah, if your employer wants you to go to work in the rain and the weather is just absolutely awful, there's a high chance you could get to an accident of some kind, you are allowed to refuse to work because that threatens your life. If they want you to come in and the weather conditions are impossible, that threatens your life. You are allowed to refuse work. Some other situations that don't apply to English teachers, such as, say, for industrial workers, if your industrial manager wants you to handle hazardous materials without using the appropriate safety equipment, you can refuse to work. Moving on. Double D, which is represented by the D with the slash through it over here. That is even. All right. So letter D is a D. Double D is a D with a slash. So unilaterally terminate the employment contract. Again, like I said earlier before I realized my mistake, this is actually the big one. You are allowed to terminate your employment contract, but only under certain circumstances, and we will get to that, but later on in this series. You are allowed to go on strike if you are a part of a union. However, I think there are certain activities you can do that are not union related that you could do legally, but I'm not sure. Now, I do know things like flash mobs are illegal, so don't do it. Also, things like walkouts. Walkouts may be illegal, but it could also be considered illegal too at the same time. So before you plan on doing anything like that, please consult an actual labor lawyer to find out what your options are. That's what letter G is. Exercise other rights prescribed by law. Talk to a lawyer if you're having problems with your English center. Just do it. Now, clause 2. The employee has the obligation to, letter A, implement the employment contract, collective bargaining agreement, and other lawful agreements. This means that you're required to be bound by the employment contract that you have signed with your employer and implement it. This means that you agree to do what you set out to do in your employment contract. It's pretty self-explanatory. B, obey internal labor regulations, the lawful management, administration, and supervision by the employer. This means that you are required by law to obey the rules of your employer as long as they are legal, because that goes down to letter C. Implement regulations of laws on labor right here. This means that as an employee, you are required by law to go ahead and implement the laws on labor, and it's right there in Vietnamese too. So all employers and all employees are required to implement the laws on labor. And yes, I will show the employer's version of this later on. But for employees, yes, you're required to implement the laws of regulation on labor, which means you are required to know this stuff so that you can protect yourself. If your employer messes up, you can call them out on it, and they have to answer for it. That's what this is for. You can call out your employer if they mess up and they can't do anything about it. All right. Now, moving back. So, moving on. Okay, so employment, vocational education. So you can also implement the regulations on employment, vocational education, social health, unemployment insurance, occupational safety, and health, which means that you're required to follow these rules. Follow employment rules, vocational education rules, social health, unemployment insurance rules, occupational safety, and health rules. So these are all required things that you need to do. And it's both in English and Vietnamese. So there's no excuse that you can say, oh, well, you didn't know. Well, now you do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go and end this video today. I'm going to go ahead and probably do Article 6 next just because of the fact that it's already there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say, have a good day. Be safe. If you like, please go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to this video. Make sure to like and comment, share with your friends. If you want to donate, please go ahead and go through the Google chat to go ahead and send me a donation. If you want to sign up for the teachers group on Zalo, follow the link. So I hope you all went and learned something today. I am going to go ahead and go through and talk about more stuff later on. So please hit that subscribe bell. Have a good day. We'll see you soon.